this is Catherine Elveston here, the Registrar at the Immigration Advisors Authority. Just having a little issue with my webcam. It doesn't look like it's coming up. So was working a few minutes ago, so it may just take a little moment to connect, but I'm sure you can hear me, and I'm going to be showing you screens on our website, so it's not so important that you can see me if it doesn't come up. So welcome to our webinar on communicating with your client. I also have Catherine Rosie, our Senior Technical Advisor, on the webinar with me today, and she's going to be helping me answer your questions. So thank you very much to everybody who's come along. We've got over 200 and the number is climbing as I speak with us today. So I'm going to be talking through some of the key aspects of good communication with your client that we consider central to your role as a licensed immigration advisor. So I'm going to be talking through some of the key things and going over some of the aspects of our code that we consider are really important, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. So if you want to ask a question or make a comment, please just type it in to the chat to ask a question, and we will have an opportunity for that probably about halfway through. So it's really important if you're asking a question that you ask it really clearly, that you write really clearly. It is quite challenging, especially when you've got a large number of people on the webinar to read through all the questions. So if you can write it as clearly as possible, that would be really helpful. I'm not going to be able to answer questions on really detailed or specific situations, but hopefully I will be able to address the issues that you're wanting me to. Okay, so we've now got 250 people, and I think it's probably okay for me to start the main part of the webinar. So, you know, the purpose, I guess, of us running these webinars is for us to help you improve the standards of immigration advice that you're providing to your clients. And I know that issues around poor communication are frequently part of, they're frequently present when we are assessing complaints that go to the tribunal. So if we were to look at all of the inspection renewals and complaints that we have, if you were to improve communication with your clients, it would go a long way to really improving standards and reducing complaints overall, I think. So certainly from my point of view, good communication with your client is at the heart of the purpose of the licensing regime, and it's not a nice to have, it's a fundamental. So if you get communication, if you have good communication with your client, then things are much more likely to go well. And I think it's really about expectations. So if you get communication right, then you establish clear expectations. And generally when things go wrong, there's a mismatch of expectations. So for example, if you are confirming a material conversation and writing to your client, you've got a record of what you've agreed. It protects you from the client coming back at a later date and saying, oh, you promised me this and you haven't done it. And it just makes sure that if there is any misunderstanding at any point along the way, that you can pick it up at that point and that it doesn't become an issue later on. And I think if we look at some of the worst examples of bad immigration advice that we are looking to avoid and prevent with what we're doing, then good client communication is generally absent. So some of the kinds of examples, you know, we've seen where things go very clearly wrong is when people make promises and don't deliver on them or don't communicate about them, or they take money and make promises to do things, and then just this silence and no communication. And some of the worst examples that we've dealt with have involved those kinds of things. So just as a bit of an overview, from where I sit, the key points, I'm just going to go over the key points of communication with your client and a client relationship. And I guess this is what we commonly see. And the process commonly goes something like this. So your first point of communication is going to be around meeting a person and establishing a relationship. So your first interactions with somebody, when they come to you for advice or they come to your company. And then generally an advisor is going to be wanting to find out about them. So they're going to be wanting to make some inquiries and ask them some questions and establish what their situation is and what their options are, and perhaps undertaken some kind of eligibility assessment. And then once that process of gathering or finding out information has taken place, then you're likely to give them advice or options on what their options are, for what their immigration options are. And then following that, you're taking instructions and entering into a written agreement. Now, some of these things might happen all at once, or they might happen over a period of time. So when you're taking instructions, you're generally entering into a written agreement. And that process of entering into a written agreement, which is really critical, is that you're agreeing in writing what services you're going to be providing and how much it will cost. And then, so once that's been agreed, you may need to go away and or gather information from them, or get them to gather information. And as you go along your process, you keep them updated. You eventually let them know when the application has been lodged, and then you provide them with some kind of, well, as you go along, as you have conversations, you'll provide them with records of material discussions that you have, particularly if your initial instructions or your initial agreement changes. And you may need to update your agreement in writing if there are any changes to your written agreement. And as you go along, you need to keep records of your written communications with clients. So in a kind of a nutshell, I guess these are the key sort of points of communication that we see advisors having with their clients. So I guess it's important just to reflect on, before I go on, just reflect on the fact that the Immigration Advisors Licensing Act licenses individuals and not companies. And so as a licensed immigration advisor, you are personally responsible for delivering on your obligations under the Code of Conduct. And you are responsible for your communication with your client. So it doesn't mean that you can't have assistance in your business, but there are key things that licensed advisors need to take responsibility for. So, for example, licensed advisors need to take responsibility for establishing the relationship with the client, the engagement process, and we're going to talk a bit about that, providing actual immigration advice, and those material communications. So it's important that licensed advisors take responsibility overall for their relationship with the client. And I think these things are really at the heart of the role of a licensed advisor. So administrative staff can do many things, but that taking responsibility for that relationship and that communication with the client is really important for the licensed advisor. And this may seem like the most obvious thing in the world to say, but it is important to say that it's not okay for a licensed advisor to have no communication with their client. And we do see this from time to time. So it is important for me to say this. It's not okay for a licensed advisor to not have any communication with their client and totally rely on staff to do that. So we're going to talk. I'm going to talk through the code and some of the key aspects of it that we do expect licensed advisors to be taking responsibility for. But that's, I guess, the starting point. Yeah, so I'm going to talk through some of the clauses of the code that refer to the key steps that I've just sort of summarised, I guess. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of the code is about communication. So I'm not going to talk through every clause of the code. I'm going to focus on clause 1, clause 2, 18 and 26. So let's just go to the code, which I've got here. So I'm just going to talk about clauses 1 and 2 first up. I'm not sure why that's gone black. Okay, so clause 1, a licensed immigration advisor must be honest, professional, diligent, and respectful and conduct themselves with due care and in a timely manner. So it's important to reflect on this in terms of your communication with your client. So you need to be honest with your client. You need to be professional in your communication, and you need to be diligent and take due care, and that means that you're making an effort. You're making an effort and you are doing what you need to and what you can to assist your client, and that includes in your communication. You need to be respectful, and that's also a key part of communication. So we do see issues in this space, and it is, and you know, there are a number of really at the heart of the role of a licensed advisor, and that's why it's important that the licensed advisor initiates that relationship with the client and is responsible for providing advice to the client. We also have 2E, which is obtaining and carrying out the informed instructions of the client as long as they're lawful. And that's a really important part in terms of actually getting the instructions of the client, which is about meeting them and finding out about them and giving them their options so that they are informed. So that again is a key part of the role of a licensed immigration advisor. I'd also really like to just reflect for a moment on clause 2C, which is facilitating the provision of interpreters and translators. So sometimes advisors say, well, I didn't speak their language, so I got my staff to deal with them, or I got staff somewhere else to deal with them, or someone who spoke their language. And I think it's really important to note that that is the appropriate way to deal with somebody, with a client who doesn't speak your language, is to use an interpreter or a translator. And that person may be a staff member, that's okay, but they're actually acting as an interpreter or a translator. They're not taking responsibility for the communication. So they are interpreting or translating whatever it is that you communicate as a licensed advisor to your client. So that's actually an obligation on you as a licensed advisor to ensure that you are getting your advice or your instructions to your client translated or interpreted professionally and accurately, and not just relying on someone else to talk to the client. So those, I guess, that's just a little bit of a reflection up front on the professional responsibilities. I do have a decision here, which I'll just jump to, on getting informed instructions. And So you'll be able to see this here. One of the very important elements of professional conduct is that the licensed immigration advisor must obtain informed instructions. That requires an evaluation of the available immigration options and the benefits and risks of the potential choices. And then the scope and terms of engagement need to be recorded in writing. So in this case, the advisor didn't comply with the engagement process. And I'll just go on here to say what note what was said later. Here it says, the advisor's excuse that busyness precluded him from attending to his professional obligations aggravates rather than mitigates his failure to maintain professional minimum standards. So often I know that busyness gets in the way of things like communicating, perhaps to the degree that you would like to or that you ought to. So it's really important that, and we'll come back to this, but that it's really important that you build into your practices processes that allow you to communicate as you need to, so that busyness doesn't become an excuse for failing to communicate in the ways that you need to. Okay, so I'm going to jump now to clauses 17 and 18 of the code. So I'm not going to go into detail on these, but just reflecting on them. So before entering into a written agreement with a client, a licensed advisor needs to provide the summary of professional responsibilities, which are available here on the website. They need to explain that summary to the client. So that's a core role of the licensed advisor. And similarly, when you enter into a written agreement, so you need to provide them with a written agreement, and you need to explain all significant matters in the written agreement to the client. So these are key aspects of your communication to the client or with the client that you need to take responsibility for yourself. And they aren't just something which is a requirement to do, but if you get these things, if you do these things right, and you've got clear expectations documented in your written agreement and you've explained them well to your client, then things are much less likely to go wrong later on. And this is where you'll have clear expectations, common expectations about what's going to happen and what you're doing. So this is a really fundamental part of your communication with your client, that you explain up front what your obligations are, what is going to happen in the process, what you've agreed. And that written agreement really is a key document that you need to make sure you get right, and that you need to keep current. So if it changes, if your services change at any point, or you are going to provide additional services, that those are documented and agreed in writing. And this is such a key fundamental part of your communication with your client. If you get this right, then things will go much better. So that is a very brief reflection on what is probably the most important point in your relationship with your client. So I'm going to go now to clause 26, which is around file management. I'm not going to go through the whole clause, but I'm just going to talk about three key ones here. So 26B, which is confirm in writing to the client when applications have been lodged and make ongoing timely updates. So once you've actually lodged the application, you need to tell your client, and often we have cases where clients don't even know that applications have been lodged. And then you need to make timely updates, and you need to take responsibility for those, making those updates and ensuring your client is informed. And it's going to depend on the circumstances in terms of how often those are, and also the expectations of what the likely timing is around the next step update. But you need to manage that in the particular situation. So that's 26B. And 26C is confirm in writing to the client the details of all material discussions with the client. So this means that you need to make a note of any material discussions that you have, and most commonly email it to the client, but you need to confirm it in writing in one way or another. Any platform is okay. That's the platform isn't relevant. But sometimes people ask us, what are material discussions? So material discussions are things that I guess impact on the particular services that you are providing to your client. So for example, if you're going to change the visa type you're applying for from a visitor visa to a work visa, or a work visa to a visitor visa, or whatever it is, if you're going to change the visa type, that would be an example of a material discussion. If you need a particular key piece of information and you can't do any further work until they provide you that, that's a key piece of that's a material discussion. You need to confirm that in writing. If you don't, and then nothing happens, and then they come and they complain, or he hasn't done anything, or she hasn't done anything, and in your mind you're waiting on this piece of information from them, but there's been sending. That's why it's so important that you have those material communications confirmed in writing, so you've got a record of that. Another important material discussion that you should be confirming in writing with your client is often around that eligibility assessment, right? So often advisable you keep a record of that on your file, but in terms of what you provide to your, I mean, in some cases there is often there is other information around that eligibility, which might not appear in the written agreement, which it's really important to communicate in writing to their application, barriers to the visa being approved, and we'll sometimes the upfront a written summary of the risks or the obstacles that they have with their application. They've already discussed with them, and putting that in writing to your client is extremely helpful. So that's a tip from me today, and it is a material discussion if you're talking about risks or potential barriers, and it is very helpful to have that in writing with your client, so you've got a record of that. So under 26A3, you need to keep a copy on your file of all your written communications with your client, and that includes your file notes, recording material communications, or your communications with them, and any electronic communications. So it doesn't matter what platform you've used, you need to make sure that you've got a system for keeping your written communications with your client. I'd also note that it doesn't matter what language those are in. So if you are communicating with your client in another language, it's okay to keep those written communications in the language that they're in. If we ever require your file for an inspection, those to be translated, but they don't need to be translated unless unless there's a requirement for us to inspect that file. So those are some of the key points that I wanted to highlight for you today. So around clause 1 and clause 2, it's about being professional, being respectful, being diligent and communicating and professionally with your client, making sure you're getting those informed instructions up front, having communication with your client around the eligibility and the advice that you go on to provide them. With your written agreement in place, and making sure. Okay. Okay, I'm just seeing the cracks, apologies, broken up. Hopefully it's clearer. So or you're making changes to your written agreement if your agreed services ever change. And maybe you keep records of your written communications that you put in writing any questions that you have. Okay. Okay. There's a problem with the audio. There's not much I can do, unfortunately. So I'm just going to carry on. I hope you can hear me. It's getting better? Okay, it's better. All right. So, yeah, keeping records of your material conversation, putting them in writing to your client, just really improves the process and the results. Everybody was able to do that. Okay, I'm going to pause and it's not working. Okay. So I'm going to and open it up for questions, and we'll see if Catherine Rosie's audio is any better. No. Okay, I'm really sorry we're having some difficulties. So, please just bear with us. Okay, everybody. I don't know if you can still hear me. I'm really sorry with, thank you for your patience. So it looks like you can hear me. We're going to attempt questions because we haven't been able to connect Catherine Rosie to the audio. So just bear with me, and we're going to have some questions coming through. Okay, so question is records of phone communications. So you don't have to keep a recording of the phone call. If it's a file note, well, if you can make a phone records. If it's a material conversation that you need to communicate with your client, then you or use spoken to you on the phone now, and we this, and that's how you would keep a record of a phone conversation. How to records. So the next question is how to keep records of free initial consultations. So you keep a record of it, but I guess the important thing is that you've got to go on to relationship with the client that you've got and that forms part of your file with your client, and it may form part of your eligibility assessment. So, and I guess there's a question around client. So, the fact that you free is relevant, really. This is a licensed immigration advisor. They are someone who you're giving immigration advice to. So it is important that you keep a record of those. And yeah, I guess you just need to find a way to do as straightforward as you can. Okay, so I'm going in and out, but I'm leave the line. I hope you can hear, and I'm just going to carry on, and yeah, next question. Okay, so I think the audio will come and go. So if you can bring me the next question, that would be great. So I'll just repeat what I said in case you didn't hear me. I think so. You do as a licensed provider. It's not relevant if you're taking money in a consultation, and you're still a licensed advisor, and you need to. So I'll just repeat that. It's not relevant if the consultation is free or not free. It is. It is. You're still a licensed advisor, and you need to meet your obligations. So it's important that you keep records, and yeah. So I've got a question. Is it mandatory to have Skype communication if your communication is 100% over email? So there's nothing that requires you to have Skype communication. There's no particular requirement that requires you to have Skype communication. So no, the platform is not relevant. What is relevant is that you are you're meeting your obligations, and all the obligations that I've talked about today. So the next question is, do you have to translate minutes with clients? So I'm assuming that's minutes of meetings. So you may have to translate them if we need to inspect the file for the purpose of a complaint or an inspection renewal. But you don't have to translate them. You don't have to translate all of your minutes of all of your meetings with clients, only if that's a requirement for an inspection. Okay, so I think the issue with that, we've just got some network connection issues, which is the reason why the sound has been coming and going. So I'm really sorry about that. It seems to be okay at the moment. So it may just come and go a little bit. Okay, so the next question is, can clerical staff do 26B, which is confirm in writing to the client when applications have been lodged and make ongoing timely updates? So I think it's important that, as a licensed advisor, you need to take responsibility for making sure that that happens, and you can't delegate that in such a way that you say, oh, well, I expected somebody else to do it and they didn't do it. So you need to take responsibility for that. As long as you're ensuring that that actually happens. Ultimately, it's your responsibility. But, when we're looking at this kind of thing, we're looking at the overall relationship, who's managing the overall relationship. And we have issues when we only see communication between a clerical staff member and the client, and we see no communication between the licensed advisor and the client. That's when we have a problem. So if we can see that the overall relationship is being managed by the licensed advisor, then if certain updates are provided, by a staff member, it's less of an issue. And if we can see that the licensed advisor is I guess, responsible for making sure that that's happening. I think that's all I need to say on that. Yeah. If a licensed advisor provides, the next question is, if a licensed advisor provides a person advice verbally, in person, do they need to provide a summary? Yes. So that's the kind of thing we're referring to when we talk about confirming in writing to the client the details of all material discussions. So if you have a meeting with somebody and you agree on a course of action, it's really important to follow that meeting up with and you could either do it in the meeting or you could do it as a follow-up, that these are the key points that we agreed. Now, you don't need to document every last thing that you said, but you just need to document the key things that you've agreed, those material things, in writing, and then you've got a written record, and your expectations are on the same page about what's going to come out of or as a result of that meeting. So when that happens, it just really improves the client's experience, and it means that things are much less likely to go wrong. Okay. So the question is, do advisors have to keep records of free initial consultations? So look, I mean, there isn't a specific clause around that in the code. But I guess it comes down to your professional business practices. I would certainly consider that it would be professional to keep records of those consultations, and it's you are having a consultation with them. Presumably, you are giving them some immigration advice, and it would be prudent to maintain those records should there be an issue. Now, I think the person may not go on to be a client in the way that you consider your clients, who obviously you take through the whole process, but a person still could make a complaint about the advice that you gave them in that initial consultation. So it's a protection, I guess, for yourself to keep a record. Okay, so we've got another question about whether the records, if you're communicating with a client in another language, whether the records need to be in English. So the answer is you can keep your records, and if you're communicating in another language, you can keep those records in that other language on your client file. That's okay. And if the authority ever needs to inspect that file for the purpose of renewal, or if the client makes a complaint, then we would need those records to be translated so that we could read them. But you're not going to need to do that for every single client file. You'd only need to do that if we're inspecting it for either a renewal or a complaint. Okay, so the next question is that reference for the decision that I mentioned. So I'll just show you that decision, which I've got up here. This is, so there you can see the reference. So that's 2016 62. Next question. So the question is, if you have an initial consultation and the client doesn't wish to proceed, do you need to provide in writing the confirmation of advice? So look, again, I think it's similar to the last question that it's a material conversation with somebody that you're providing immigration advice to. So I would consider that it would be prudent to do that. Now, you could argue potentially that they're not your client, but you are a licensed immigration advisor and you are providing them with immigration advice and they are deciding not to go ahead. So I think it would be prudent, but it's potentially arguable whether it's an absolute requirement or not. I think that's the best answer I can give off the top of my head. So we have got some more questions that'll be coming through. So just bear with us a moment. Actually, okay, sorry, I'm just gonna revise my answer to that. I'm going to revise my answer to those questions about the initial consultation, because if you look at 16B of the Code of Conduct, which I'll pull up. So under 16B, initial consultations. A licensed immigration advisor must, when conducting an initial consultation with the client or potential client, whether charging a fee or not, is not required to meet the requirements at 17 and 18 below, but must adhere to all other requirements of this Code of Conduct. So that means they don't have to, with those initial consultations, you don't have to provide the summary professional responsibilities or explain it. You don't have to enter into a written agreement, but you have to adhere to all other requirements of the Code of Conduct. So that means that you do have to adhere to 26C, which is confirm in writing the details of all material discussions with the client. So you do need to maintain those records, and you do need to confirm those material conversations in writing from the initial consultations. No more questions? Wow, okay. So there are no more questions. That's great. Now, don't go just yet. I've got a few more things to mention, but the sound looks like it might not be so good. Just okay, it's come back. So thank you very much. So there's over 300 of you who are on this webinar today. Again, I'm really sorry about the sound quality issues, but just as a bit of a recap, it's really important just to think about, I guess, taking responsibility for your communication with your client, and making sure that you as a licensed advisor are, I guess, in charge of your communication with your client. It's a really important part of your role as a licensed immigration advisor. So don't dismiss it as a nice to have. It really should be a priority. And it's really helpful if you can put in place good processes to make it easy for yourself. So easy ways, easy filing system for your emails or whatever form of written communication you're using, just to keep things easily for yourselves. Having a system where it's easy for you to send a written confirmation and keep a record of that. I really encourage you to be proactive in your communications with your clients. So notice or pick up on when things aren't going right and front foot sorting it out. And that comes back to some of those clause 1 things. So being professional and just making good communication a priority. So you're sorting things out before they go wrong. And just remember, I guess, that things go wrong when there are mismatched expectations. So putting in place those things where your expectations are on the same page right from the beginning and all the way through. So at your initial consultations, setting the scene for their expectations being on the same page as you, and making sure that you're communicating and keeping good records of those communications to make sure that your expectations those expectations are on the same page. I think the sound quality's just dropped out again. So just, remember that, remember to be honest and to be professional. So this is an activity that you can count towards your CPD for the year, and in order to do that, you just need to take a few moments to reflect on some of the things that we've talked about today, and take a few moments to note down any takeaways that you have, and maybe only one thing, or anything that you might want to do differently as a result of some of the things that we've talked about today. So you may just want to note down something that you want to remind yourself of, or if you think that there's a change that you might need to make in your business, maybe put some time in your diary to plan how you're going to do that. So I just encourage you to take now the next 5 minutes to do that, and yeah, I hope that this has been useful. Thank you very much for joining us, and I apologise again for the sound quality. This will be available as a recording on our website, and we'll put a link to that in the next newsletter. I think that's all I need to say. So if you do have any feedback other than sound quality, which we'll see what we can do about for next time, please do send it through to me. It'll be really valuable for any webinars that we run next year. If you do have any suggestions for webinars that you'd like us to run next year, please also let me know. So thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all the best, and we'll see you again soon. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.